Good evening, Fayetteville. My name is Seth Briley.
And my name is Kelly Green. This evening we have breaking news from Ukraine. An explosion occurred today at Chernobyl power plant. After violating normal procedures to test a new design, the explosion resulted in the destruction of the Chernobyl 4 reactor.
The most recent reports show that there has been one fatality, along with one person in critical condition. Numerous firefighters were injured while attending to the scene, but it is unclear what their current condition is.
We will now cut over to Holmer and Teresa Nguyen to give more insight as to what happened.
It's important to start out by explaining the reactor design. So within the reactor is the core, which is made up of blocks of graphite, as you can see here. Hundreds of channels are cut through the core, and water runs through the channels, which is then turned to steam due to the heat produced by the nuclear fuel rods. Steam then powers the turbines, which generate the electrical power, which then is supplied to the surrounding area. If there is not sufficient water to absorb the heat within the channels, an explosion or meltdown could occur due to the rising temperature.
An extremely important part of the design are the control rods right here. The control rods regulate reactivity, where there are generally 200 being inserted into the core. To decrease the reactivity, more rods are inserted. To increase the reactivity, rods are withdrawn. One important safety measure required at this reactor was the presence of at least 15 rods.
The day of the disaster, the reactor was due for annual maintenance, but the crew decided to shut it down to 25% capacity before and maintenance to test a new safety design. The emergency cooling system was also shut off, which prohibited it from working in case of an emergency. After being delayed for 10 hours due to orders from Kiev, the operators began to manually shut down the capacity to save time. The engineers didn't take into account the self-damping factor of the reactor and brought it down to 1% capacity without realizing it.
When the reactor runs on low capacity, the reactor begins to run unevenly, which is unstable and dangerous. After bringing the capacity up to 10%, they continued the experiment. There are a series of poor decisions such as shutting off the steam pipe and reducing the flow of water and then shoving the control rods into the core as a last-ditch effort. The reactivity of the core was increased, which resulted in the explosion. The most obvious cause for this event is the lack of safety enforcement. Over time, the operators had experienced no negative consequences for ignoring safety regulations. Therefore, there was no incentive for them to follow safety regulations on this day.
There was also bias evident in this situation in the form of groupthink. All operators were highly experienced and they all thought they were doing everything correctly, even though they were violating procedures. This is a dangerous thing to have when failures can have such disastrous consequences.
Chernobyl could have been prevented if a few things had been different. The first change would be to ramp up the safety procedures. For example, instead of the operators being able to override everything with no negative consequences, they should implement a security override where someone in a higher position of control off base had to approve the changes in the system. This would provide an unbiased position of authority.
In addition, making a containment dome required for reactors is another important aspect to have present. This dome contains all possible radiation if an explosion were to occur. One last important thing to add in would be a system lock that prohibits lowering the capacity below 20%, which is the lowest level allowed. Since there was no lock on the system, the engineers were able to lower it to 1%, which put into play events that led to the explosion. Now back to you, Kelly.
On this day in history, 20 years ago, the Chernobyl disaster occurred. It was one of the largest nuclear reactor disasters in history.
In the days following the disaster, at least 24 reactor operators and firefighters died due to radiation exposure and injuries sustained at the scene. Upwards of 70,000 people are estimated to have died due to radiation poisoning in the years after the disaster.
Since people were not notified about the radiation effects, countless people consumed contaminated food and drinks in the years following, which has led to rises in radiation poisoning, cancer, and multiple other diseases. In fact, the radioactive material released into the environment during this event is more than 200 times the amount released during World War II when the U.S. bombed Japan.
It's also important to note the political climate in that time. Ukraine and the rest of the Soviet Union were extremely isolated from the technological advancements being made around the world due to the Cold War. This resulted in reactor designs that were not as up to date as they should have been. Additionally, there was a great need for plutonium during the war, which caused the government to choose the cheapest and fastest reactor designs.
Due to the outdated, cheap designs of the Chernobyl reactors, the disaster occurred, which has led to far-reaching consequences that are not fully realized to this day. Signing off for IUTV, I'm Kelly Green.
And I'm Seth Briley.
Good night.
We're saving all these bloopers for like an after 5-minute footage montage.
Sure.
Okay.
Who's the most diva?
Breaking news from Ukraine. Good morning, everyone. Today is April 26, 2006. What are you doing? An explosion occurred today. Can I start again?
Yeah.
Take 5.
And my name is Kelly Green. This new... Oh, can't do this. This is horrible. Okay, cut. Just cut. Stop.
Is my eye twitching?